Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, talking with a 19-year-old guest that I befriended last year. He's a college sophomore with a real estate investing-related major. What does he think about Generation Z's future? Is in-person social life dead? And what do you really learn about real estate and economics in college today on Get Rich Education?
Since 2014, the powerful Get Rich Education podcast has created more passive income for people than nearly any other show in the world. This show teaches you how to earn strong returns from passive real estate investing in the best markets without losing your time being a flipper or landlord. Show host Keith Weinhold writes for both Forbes and Rich Dad Advisors and delivers a new show every week. Since 2014, there's been millions of listener downloads in 188 world nations. He has A-list show guests include top-selling personal finance author Robert Kiyosaki. Get Rich Education can be heard on every podcast platform, plus it has its own dedicated Apple and Android listener phone apps. Build wealth on the go with the Get Rich Education podcast. Sign up now for the Get Rich Education podcast or visit GetRichEducation.com.
The same place where I get my own mortgage loans is where you can get yours, Ridge Lending Group, NMLS 42056. They provided our listeners with more loans than anyone because they specialize in income properties. They help you build a long-term plan for growing your real estate empire with leverage. Start your pre-qual and even chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. While it's on your mind, start at ridgelendinggroup.com. That's ridgelendinggroup.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE. From Concord, New Hampshire to Concord, California, and across 188 nations worldwide, you're listening to one of America's longest running and most listened to shows on real estate investing. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, and this is Get Rich Education. Increasingly, people ask, why even go to college? Is the value of higher education even worth it to drag yourself to an 8 a.m. American Lit class while living off of dining hall breakfast biscuits and chicken strips for $100,000 a year? It's been estimated that 1 in 7 men are NEETs, N-E-E-T. That means not in education, employed, or training. Why put on a suit and tie and show up at a job when you have a reasonable facsimile of life online and you have Discord and Reddit and trade stocks on Robinhood and crypto on Coinbase? Now, I don't think that's going to be good for you, and I still think that there are a lot of positives about attending college. At least 15 to 20 colleges close each year in the United States. And despite this, most people that I talk to, they still seem to be mostly positive about college, or they have this expectation that their kids go to college. So anecdotally, this hasn't changed. I probably wouldn't even be as aware of this shift if I didn't read media like I do. If I just talked to people informally, I really wouldn't know. One thing that has not changed also is the notion of the broke college student. I used to be one of those. Now, America is just a couple years removed from that wave of elevated inflation, and war in Iran has positioned to stoke a second wave of inflation. Today's guest told me that he does pay credit card finance charges, even though he makes more than the minimum payment, just kind of like I did as a college student. The default state of teenage society today is different. It used to be boredom, and now that's been replaced with anxiety. That part has certainly changed, and often it tends to be teen anxiety over such nonsense things. I mean, I have a teenage niece. One example is the burden of maintaining your Snapchat streak. Oh my gosh, if you're a Gen Zer, you know what I'm talking about. Basically a Snap streak, where you've got to send a friend a photo or video every single day to keep your streak going. 2 people have to send it to each other. And people with long streaks, they even send each other a photo of the floor just to keep the streak going. I mean, talk about anxiety over the wrong things. Well, today's team guest, Hunter, he has a somewhat better grip on life. I haven't met his parents yet, but they've done an amazing job. In fact, Hunter's dad owns rental property, which kind of helps to fuel some of his interests and desire. But in order to cope with inflation and expenses, buy now, pay later programs have really taken off. They're widely known, but less widely known are rent now, pay later plans. They're booming. Platforms like Livable, Flex, and Affirm. They're used by lower income and lower credit score tenants that often live paycheck to paycheck. And how it works is that these tenants are extended money at the beginning of the month to pay the rent. They often pay a flat subscription fee plus 1% of the rent. And, hey, that could be better than the tenant paying late fees to the landlord. I learned from one tenant that had trouble paying his $1,850 in rent that Flex charged him a $15 monthly subscription plus 1% of the total rent for providing the service. So his total fees for the app were around $33 a month. Rent now, pay later. You're probably only going to hear more about it. But if you're a landlord, you probably do not know that your tenant is using a rent now, pay later plan because you just received the full payment on time and then your tenant pays back the service later. Remember, it is called rent now, pay later. Oh, before we bring in our guest, can I ask you for some quick help? Maybe you wanted to tell me what you think about the show. You could have been listening for years, but you don't think that you can reach me. If this show has helped you become a better investor, the best way to support the podcast is to leave a quick rating or review. It helps more investors discover the show. Just tap the 5 stars in your podcast app. It can take as little as 10 seconds, and I will read it myself. Thanks in advance for leaving a rating and review. Let's meet this week's guest. This week's guest is the youngest we've ever had in show history. He's a teenager, so he's about a generation younger than me, and it's his first time on a podcast. He is a sophomore student athlete at the University of Alaska Anchorage, where he competes in the 800 meters for the track and field team. He runs about a 155. His major is management with a specialization in real estate and property management. And he's just into so many things beyond athletics and academics. He serves as an ambassador for the Widener Property Management and Real Estate Program. He's also an officer of the Real Estate Management and Investment Club. From Wisconsin, he's 19 years old, a straight A student. He's also an RA, that's a resident assistant there, helping out students at the dorms. Welcome to GRE, Hunter Taddy.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Taddy is spelled Taddy. I met Hunter almost 6 months ago. A property manager introduced us, just thinking that we might have some things in common, and she sure was right. We've gotten together a few times, including going running at one time where, well, I had more than a little trouble keeping up with an active college athlete. The last time we sat down for coffee, just last week, I looked at my watch, we were done, and we sat almost 2.5 hours. Like, how many teenagers could really hold my attention for that long? But he just understands the world and politics surprisingly well for a 19-year-old. He's confident and well thought out. He's read War and Peace. He even does some of his own cooking and avoids seed oils. And, Hunter, being born in 2006, when GRE debuted in 2014, you were 8 years old. So before we talk about you, let's talk about your generation, Generation Z. What do you think some of the markers of your generation are?
Yeah, so it's, as I've shared with you in the past, it's interesting because, especially at UAA, I'm mostly surrounded by athletes. So athletes tend to be a lot more social, just like how they've grown up. They're always around people that tend to be a lot more driven. But then when I talk to non-athletes, it's a little bit different. My generation is definitely, they're on their phone a lot. I mean, I've told you before, like I avoid social media. Well, I wouldn't say like the flag, but I avoid it a lot because I know A, how addicting it is, and B, just like, the word of my generation is slop or brain rot, and which is most of the stuff on the internet. But
Yeah.
it seems to be like there's a lot of anxiety in my generation, a lot of like lack of accountability, which I've noticed a lot of like lack of responsibility, and it's almost like self-indulgent in a way where it's like, oh, I'm so lazy, or oh, I'm so this, or I'm so that. And it's just kind of weird. You don't really get that much with like the athletes. Back to the social aspect, I don't know if you've seen that headline recently that's like the alcohol industry has lost $830 million over the past 4 years because
I
Messi doesn't drink. The real story isn't about Gen Z not wanting to drink alcohol. It's about Gen Z not like really being social. I
Right.
mean, I don't see that many like hangouts as much as like when I hear from like my parents, every night you're going somewhere with your friends, or you're going to the bar, you're going to a bonfire or things like that. And it's just, you don't see it as much. A lot of people are just in their rooms or online, and the online gaming, I don't game a lot, but gaming with friends is actually really fun to do sometimes. But everything's a lot more digital, from the communication to like the spaces, where you hang out, whether it's video games or whether it's VR chat. I know some people do that, or Discord, or just like internet forums and things like that. Yeah, just a lot more digital.
Yeah, you use little or no social media personally. I know you manage the Instagram page for your
Mm.
real estate organization, but yeah, there is more of this perception of in-person social life, maybe not dead, but dying. I've learned that 51% of 18 to 24-year-old men have never asked out a woman in person. You were sharing with me at how, people have anxiety just about ordering food in person at a restaurant in Gen Z.
It's actually funny. So, because of how that conversation escalated, I technically did ask her out on Snapchat, but then she was like, "You have to ask me out in person." And then I did eventually ask her out in person.
Now, when it comes to in-person meetings, after a few meetings with you, I noticed something rare when it's about seeing people in person. You have virtues that I think are somewhat rare for Generation Z. I mean, you actually show up on time. This chat we're having right now, it's the fourth time we've gotten together, and you actually showed up early each of the four times, which is something that I really notice and appreciate, which even for people my age, it seems like it's a virtue that they've lost. I mean, showing up on time is just common decency. That's just doing what you said that you were going to do. I find that pretty interesting. But when it comes to your generation, being in college now, I mean, college is tough. When I went to college, I took on student loans. My parents and I each paid for half of the tuition and also worked a part-time job while I was there. So I mean, you hang out with a lot of athletes, but how is it with balancing, the income and student loans? Because, college kids are still pretty poor.
I wanted to run for a Division II program because you can get athletic scholarship. I came in as a walk-on. I'm not on any athletic scholarship. I get free housing and free meals.
For being an RA?
Yeah, with my RA position. I actually got the RA position my second semester, so I got it as a freshman, which was like really, really clutch. So my dad was in the Air Force for 20 years, and I got the GI Bill for like, I think 6 months. So I got my two first semesters of tuition paid for, and then I got some money for like housing and stuff. I mean, I pocketed most of that just because, I got it for free already. I don't get any more help from the GI Bill because I'm not in Wisconsin. But if I went to Wisconsin, I could go to any school for free, like tuition free. So, sometimes I do think about that. But with my real estate program, oh my gosh, the scholarship deadline every year, they give out like $50,000 in scholarships. A lot of them are from Widener and then just other like local real estate companies in the area. Last year, I got a $2,500 scholarship to travel to the National Apartment Association's Apartmentalized. It's like their yearly conference in Las Vegas, and that was pretty cool. Some of that stuff kind of went over my head, but a lot of the stuff about AI was like just really interesting to hear, especially just about property management. And it's crazy to me because like AI is almost like my generation's thing since we're like growing up with it.
Yeah.
And then hearing like a lot of like the older people in the property management profession talk about it. They're still talking about when they had to keep the records on pen and paper, or like files and stuff. And I'm like, this is crazy. So I have scholarships with the real estate program. If I'm lucky, I can get up to almost $10,000 after the spring. So that means I pay in-state tuition because I live on campus. It was a deal they were running after COVID. So that's only like $5,700. I mean, my scholarships will be able to cover that. This semester, I paid like 2,000 of it or something. And then my parents were kind enough to cover the rest. And then I'm going to pay them back right away after the year ends once I get those scholarships. And then, yeah, I get $11 an hour for working desk at my RA job. It's tax-free, so I mean, it's not totally bad, but I don't working desk hours that much because we only have them at night. And then, being an athlete, I don't like staying up until, 1 o'clock sometimes. I mean, the other night I had to work a 9 to 3 desk shift, and that screwed my whole schedule for an entire week. Yeah.
Okay. So when you graduate college in a few years, you could very well come out with a lower student loan balance than a lot of others did, although you might still have an informal loan with dad in there as well. How do you and a lot of people of your generation see your financial future? That sure can be hard to predict, but a lot of people see this crushing debt with student loans. And I wonder, even though it could be far into the future, if really Gen Z thinks that they're ever going to be able to afford a home. Now, when it comes to the student loans, I know I shared with you when we sat down for coffee that I had a balance. I think it was like a $20,000 balance when I graduated, because again, my parents paid half of it and I worked part-time when I went to school. I shared with you that I just took that balance and paid very little interest on my student loan balance because I kept transferring it repeatedly onto these 0% APR credit cards. And when that introductory rate expired on one card, I would just transfer it onto another card. So I've long been comfortable with debt.
So me personally, I do not want to take out a loan from any entity. I'm very fortunate and privileged that my parents are able to, front that money for me when I need it. I try to pay them back right away. I do not want student loans. Like, my goal is to get out of college, without owing anybody any money. It's weird because I'm from such a small town in Wisconsin, and I view trades a lot differently than like a lot of my peers who grew up in the big city. I know blue collar millionaires, right? People who just, put their nose to the grindstone, pouring concrete, working, driving a semi, only do that for maybe 5 or 10 years. Like my cousin pours concrete, and then the other one, I think, works for a construction company.
The Midwestern work ethic.
They're sitting on tens of thousands of dollars in their savings account right now. You can make the argument, well, their back's going to give out in a couple of years. And some of that's true. But also, you don't have to be the guy pouring concrete for how long. You could be the business owner, or you could be the guy who's the plumber for 5-10 years and then, start your own plumbing business. That's why I don't look at student loans as like, I need this college degree to like make money or be successful. Like, I've met a lot of people who legitimately have that mindset. It's like, I understand that if you've grown up in that sort of like sphere, you've grown up with those ideas. But to me, it's like, I know if I can't pay for college or if I don't graduate college, I know I'm going to be fine. I could go, work construction, or I could go, mow lawns or something. I guess I just view it differently. But a lot of people think they need those student loans. So, they sign up for them. And I looked it up the other day. The average time to pay off student loans is like 20 years or something like that.
Yeah, I believe it. That is kind of sad.
That's insane to me. I want my lawyers going to college. I want my doctors going to college. I want all these people to have a good education. But like $100,000 to $200,000, I just see that and it's like, oh, I don't know, man. I sign up for the FAFSA every year, but I never get anything.
Free application for federal student aid.
Yeah, but I know some people get like Pell Grants. If I'm not wrong, I think the Pell Grants are just, I don't know, they have to pay those back.
In my way, it seemed like I was applying for the Stafford loan. I was lower middle class. I don't think we quite qualified for the Pell Grant, the grant being like free money and a loan is something that you need to pay back, of course. And of course, in addition to student loans, we regularly have students using credit cards and probably not being able to pay the full balance as they make their way and try to pay their way through college. That's certainly one thing that I did.
Here's something for you. DoorDash. My generation and DoorDash is so crazy. I look at some of these people. We have like a desk at some of the halls, and the amount of people who just DoorDash, some of these people are DoorDashing every night, and that's not cheap. Like, sometimes it's like $30 just to get Taco Bell or, Wingstop or something like that. And then Klarna, it's like, finance a pizza. Like, what are we doing here?
Sure, yeah, you're making a down payment on a blooming onion and financing it and making the last payment on it 3 years later or something
That's
crazy like that. 100%. And yeah, I would imagine home ownership is just seen as something that's so far into the future, it's almost unfathomable.
Yeah. It's funny to me because, I come from, again, very small town. The cost of living is like extremely low compared to the country. I'm pretty sure Green Bay was voted number one place to live by U.S. News and World Report a couple of years ago, number one place to live in the United States. But more of the people back home who work these jobs in the trades, like the thought of owning a home seems a lot more real to them than my friends who are in college. And a lot of that has to do with, like we're in bigger cities. Again, people have more debt. But yeah, I mean, you look at those prices of homes. I think the median home price in Anchorage is like $426,000. And just, looking at that number is like, how am I ever going to afford that? One of my friends, he's in the real estate program. He's got $40,000 saved up. He's got his Roth IRA maxed out. It's weird because this is one of the points I want to make. So in my generation, you have people who have all these resources, especially with the internet, and they're doing very well with it. They're taking it and they're running with it. And then you have the other part of my generation who's doing the buy now, pay later option. It's almost like a upside down bell curve or something like that. The people who are good are getting so much better, and the people who are making the bad decisions are getting so much more worse.
The K-shaped economy starts young.
It's just interesting to see sometimes because you have some people like, oh, I can't afford this, I can't afford that. And it's like, yeah, being a college student is hard. But then it's like you buy your $6 coffee every day. And it's, I'm guilty of that too. My spending habits aren't the best. And then you look at like home ownership, inflation is real, cost of living is getting higher, but also my dad talks about this a lot. Like our standards are getting so much higher too.
Great point.
Our houses are getting bigger. Kids don't share bedrooms anymore. All our kids have to have our phone. All our kids have to have the newest thing or the newest coat. And, you want nice things for your family. I get that. I don't have a family, so I can only talk about this so much. But I mean, our standards are getting a lot higher as well. I mean, you look at our grandparents' houses and they're like these just small 1-story houses, 1 bathroom. I look at the house that my dad grew up in. He shared a room with his brother until he graduated. Right. And then you look at all these families, kids live in their bedroom. It's so weird to me that like siblings, they know each other, but they don't know each other because they're sitting in their rooms all day and they're looking at their phones.
You surface a good and salient point, Hunter, that a lot of people don't bring up. Because the K-shaped economy, that means a widening disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Mm-hmm. But the entire K also keeps moving up. So standards of living continue to get better for both the haves and the have-nots, even though the disparity between them continues to widen. And yes, a poor person today has Wi-Fi and has air conditioning and a lot of minor conveniences that poor people didn't have 75 years ago. You're listening to Get Rich Education. We're doing something different this week, talking to the youngest guest in GRE history. His name's Hunter Taddy. We're going to talk more when we come back about what he's learning in classes, economics and real estate classes, because that is one thing that college students do. Remember, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Flock Homes helps you retire from real estate and landlording, whether it's one problem property or your whole portfolio through a 721 exchange, deferring your capital gains tax and depreciation recapture. It's a strategy long used by the ultra-wealthy. Now, mom and pop landlords can 721 their residential real estate. Request your initial valuation. See if your properties qualify at flockhomes.com/GRE. That's FLOCKhomes.com/GRE. Most people think they're playing it safe with their liquid money, but they're actually losing. Savings accounts and bonds don't keep up when true inflation eats 6 or 7% of your wealth every single year. I invest my liquidity with FFI, Freedom Family Investments, in their flagship program. Why? Fixed 10 to 12% returns have been predictable and paid quarterly. There's real-world security backed by needs-based real estate like affordable housing, senior living, and healthcare. Ask about the Freedom Flagship Program when you speak to a Freedom Coach there. And that's just one part of their family of products. They've got workshops, webinars, and seminars designed to educate you before you invest. Start with as little as $25K and finally get your money working as hard as you do. Get started at freedomfamilyinvestments.com/GRE or send a text now. It's 1-937-795-8989. Yep, text the Freedom Coach directly. Again, 1-937-795-8989.
This is Rich Dad, Poor Dad author Robert Kiyosaki. Listen to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We're talking with Gen Z and student athlete Hunter Taddy. He's a sophomore college student, and he's got a management degree with a concentration in real estate investing. So, yeah, Hunter, tell us some of the things that you've learned about in an economics class or two that you've taken there at UAA.
So I had an economics class last semester, but the teacher is basically tenured and he only posted YouTube videos and like 3 quizzes was like the entire grade. He made us grade a 2,000 essay and didn't even grade it. Wow. So I didn't learn anything about economics, but that was macro and now I'm in micro. And this professor, he's fantastic. He talks to Anchorage and Alaska legislators all the time. He was on Meet the Press. Like he's very, 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 very smart and well-spoken.
One of the professors, and he's also Yale educated, as I understand.
Yeah. I always get crap from my cross-country teammates because most of them are STEM majors. There's a lot of engineers, and then there's, you have people who are in like kinesiology, and then a lot of aviation. But they always give me crap because like, oh, business, it's supply and demand, blah, blah, blah. But then like legitimately, economics has been so fascinating for me. Just like, consumer behavior, opportunity cost, trade-off. One of the things is rent control, right? Definitely a big conversation, especially in like my generation, because of all these rising prices. And then, the landlord always gets the negative connotation, right?
Landlords are greedy. I wouldn't believe that as a college student.
When you think about rent control, it's like as soon as you put that binding price ceiling on the rent prices in an area, that's why there's not enough housing on the West Coast. That's why landlords are painting over the light switches, or they're not fixing your toilet, or they're not fixing the leaky sink. There's just a lack of understanding general society about like just how markets work and why, businesses make certain decisions that they do. That's one thing with like a lot of my generation is a lot of them are almost anti-business in a sense, but they love being consumers. What my dad talks about a lot is as the business owner, like when you work for a company, a lot of the times you can clock in, clock out, you go home and you lay your head on the pillow and you don't have to worry about anything. Right. But when you're the business owner, like my dad, and if you have a lot of anxiety like he does about certain things and you stress a lot, you're up at 2 a.m. wondering if the LVP you put in someone's kitchen is going to buckle, and then you're going to have to go back and fix it all and all these things. And so I definitely have a lot more, to say, understanding for like business owners and like landlords. Yeah, the economics class has just broadened my understanding of how the world works. I think that's a class that everyone should take, and it is a general ed, but I think it's a class everyone should pay attention to as well.
Sure. Rent control gives landlords no incentive to make improvements to a property. So, yeah, it's good that you're learning about this in econ class. Tell us about some of the other things that you've learned in economics or in your more real estate investor-centric college courses.
So I'll focus more on the real estate stuff. So Dean Widener Apartment Homes, one of the top 5, I think, largest owners of apartment homes in terms of units, like in the United States, right? He basically came to Anchorage and he wanted to build the Widener program, basically like a farm for property managers, like, give this education and then they come work for Widener, they come work for, whoever. A lot of the education has to do with property management. So there's leasing, asset maintenance, talk a lot about operating budgets, risk management. All students in the program memorize the cash flow pro forma by heart. So, you have gross potential income, loss to lease, vacancy, net revenue, other income, expense reimbursements, MADI-POO, which is maintenance, admin, taxes, insurance, payroll, and utilities.
I hadn't heard that acronym before. What is it? MADI-POO?
MADI-POO. I'm pretty sure my professor, that's kind of like his thing. I didn't finish it all, but we have it all memorized. And then we do like a lot of fair housing and landlord tenant law. yesterday in my real estate investment finance course, we were analyzing loans and we were making like amortization tables.
Yeah.
And then so we were looking at like interest rates, how a balloon loan works, variable interest rates. I took real estate maintenance and risk last semester, and that was really awesome. We got to visit buildings all across Anchorage and talk with the property managers, talk about maintenance systems, general maintenance of the property management, the day-to-day, things like that. And then leasing, we actually had us basically go undercover. We have to have 3 properties, and we go do a showing at all of them, and then we had to review them, and then we did a presentation about them, and like we basically reviewed them and graded like the leasing agent and how they did. That one was really cool.
Okay, sort of like a mock tenant grading a leasing agent,
Yeah.
and then showing you amenities, explaining lease length, things like that.
And then seeing if they violated any like fair housing things. He said don't necessarily try and bait them, but one of the questions that one of my classmates asked, so what kind of people live here? And then the good property manager, says, we rent to anyone that fits our criteria. And then you have some people that's like, oh, you should have said that.
Yeah, it's pretty touchy. Age, race, family status, right?
Yeah. So we definitely have that drilled in our heads as well, like landlord-tenant law and then like fair housing.
You told me something interesting when we got together. When you run the numbers for property, that the numbers always work better in one condition than they do in another.
So we do cap rate, and so cap rate is NOI over value, I believe.
Yep.
So we analyze the cap rates for all the properties, and then we see what is our return if we pay cash or what is our return when we pay leverage. And sometimes it's better if you pay cash, or sometimes it's better if it's leverage. But I always think, even if you could pay cash, if you pay, say, $3 million for the whole complex, well, you could put a $500,000 down payment on 6 other properties. So I always thought that was weird, because that's just, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad after my dad recommended it to me, and then just talking to my dad about leveraged investments. Yeah, why don't you do that instead?
Right. As long as you control your cash flow and pay the mortgage and the operating expenses. Yeah, we typically talk about getting the leverage here, because the appreciation rate has absolutely nothing to do with the amount of equity that's in the property. Is there anything else interesting that you learned from going out in the field and actually seeing some properties or talking to some managers? And I think this is really interesting, because a lot of times when people graduate college, they tend to broad brushstroke students or new graduates and say, yeah, but they haven't gotten out in the real world yet. But you actually are as a student.
Yeah, so that's one thing I really love about our program. And I really love our professor. He owns properties himself. It's not like a pyramid scheme thing where like almost like you're going to college to learn how to be a professor. And sometimes, we need those people for like research and stuff, but like he's actually done the work. He knows what it's like. He can relate to things that we're talking about. Yeah, we get a lot of that real world experience, which is really awesome. Going about that, like the leasing experience, one of the things with like a lot of the managers, especially in Anchorage, because there's such a housing shortage, a lot of them didn't really like try because they like almost don't have to, because I think a lot of them assume you're going to lease from someone anyways, no matter, because it's not necessarily really competitive. So
because the vacancy rate is so small.
Yeah, so it's just like, here's the kitchen, we're actually taught in the leasing class, leasing strategies. And also what's really good about our classes, we read like a lot of personal growth books in our classes. So like in our leasing class, our professor had us read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Stephen Covey.
And then I think for our real estate investment class, we're going to read The Compounding Effect. I don't know what it's about, but I mean, I really appreciate how our professor gives us like those books and that knowledge that's not just, specific to real estate. It's like how to become like a better person, or how to become better at personal finance in general.
All right, so some conceptual and some mindset stuff, along with more of the hands-on and more of the numbers. Well, before I ask you what's next for you, do you have any last thoughts with what you've learned in class, or just anything overall about your generation and lifestyle and getting along financially for a college student?
In April, I'm going down to Austin for the Property Con, which is Institute of Real Estate Management, big conference. I think they have this one every year too. I think John Quinones, the guy from What Would You Do, is going to be like one of the keynote speakers. So looking forward to that. Definitely looking forward to some of like learning more about like AI and how it's used in like the property management and like real estate sphere. And then I'm kind of interested in green building because it almost seems to be like win-win, right? Because better for the environment and then better for the investor most of the time, like through these retrofits, like you're just switching to LED light bulbs. We ran those numbers a lot in my maintenance class. Like, what would it be like if you switch from iridescent to LED light bulbs? And it's like, that's like one of the things that all property managers should do because you're saving sometimes thousands of dollars in 7 or 10 year period or whatever it is.
I can improve the cap rate right there.
Yeah, I want to definitely learn more about like the green building. And also just because, I'm a healthy person. When I build my house one day, I don't want to have like a lot of toxic materials in it and stuff as well. I have one friend, he's really, really dialed into his health. They've talked about him with you before, but he's not even gonna have drywall in his house because there's some like toxic thing in drywall or something. Like he's gonna build it out of brick and mud or something. I don't know.
Oh, he can't just go live in any rental. Yeah, well, Hunter, this has been really good. Your dad owns rentals in Wisconsin, and like you mentioned, he's read Rich Dad, Poor Dad himself, so that's kind of an influence on you. And you do have a management internship back in Wisconsin this summer. But before we go on, you mentioned to me that your dad owns a certain type of apartments in Wisconsin, and I've never heard of that type before. What are they called, and then what does that mean?
I think the name is local to the city itself in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. So they're called Custardales. I think they were homes built after World War II, I believe, for like GIs and things like that. So, just before he got in the Air Force, he was in Saudi Arabia for a year, and he was thinking about, what am I going to do when I retire? Because he knew after the year was done, he was going to retire and come back to Wisconsin. And one of his friends got him into real estate, and he talked to my mom a little bit, and they just started buying properties. So that was in 2018, and now they own about 70 units, mostly duplexes, with their biggest being a 5-plex. They also have a 18-bed assisted living facility. Most of the 70 units are called Custardales. They're all like cookie cutter, like the same. They're basically the same layout. Sometimes it's just flipped or whatever. And he basically did the same thing each time. A lot of them were like really run down. Ones that they purchased had someone with a chicken living on top of the refrigerator, and then when they locked the place up after they bought it, he broke back in and took stuff. And so they've really actually like helped the community in a way by remodeling a lot of these homes. And then my dad would refinance them, and then he would take that money and then invest it into another property. And he just kept doing that again and again and again. Yeah, so they buy and hold. We self-manage because there's not really a reputable property management service in the area.
This is near Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Maybe you've heard that name before, Manitowoc. They make heavy construction equipment. And you are going back to Wisconsin this summer for a management-related internship. Yeah, well, Hunter, this has been great. Talking about what your generation's like, what you do in your classes, and the practical experience that you're already getting as a 19-year-old. I mean, you're just substantially further ahead than I was as a geography degree student and major way back in the day. If anyone wants to reach out to you, see what you're doing, or contact you, what's the best way for them to do that, Hunter?
So I don't have Instagram or Facebook, but I do have LinkedIn. So if you just search Hunter Taddy, again, Taddy, on LinkedIn, you can find me there. Also, just give my email. It's htoddy007@gmail.com.
All right, look that up if you want to reach out to Hunter. Yeah, it's been great having you here. Thanks so much for coming onto the show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, a fresh perspective from college student Hunter Taddy today. He has got his act together amazingly well for a teenager. And, talking to him made me think about something. Like I said, when I graduated college, and it was just with a bachelor's degree, by the way, pretty humble bachelor's, double major, geography and regional planning, I had that $20K in student loan debt, which I transferred onto 0% APR credit cards over and over again. And in inflation-adjusted terms, that might be $40K in today's dollars. I had no incentive to pay it down, let alone pay it off, since my finance charges were essentially zero. So that's why I probably carried that balance for close to 20 years. But this is the first time that I thought about the fact that that very habit was probably a benefit to me, not because it saved me from paying interest on student loans, but because it got me comfortable with holding debt for the long term and rationalizing that there would be an opportunity cost to paying off that debt, because a payoff would have meant that I would forego the opportunity of investing those dollars to get gains. That habit got me comfortable with prudently using debt and leverage as a real estate investor, and that helped me own and control more property sooner. So it was a somewhat autodidactic approach to good debt. Today, we talk with a young, likely soon-to-be investor. Oppositely, next week here on the show, we're talking about the bookend on the other side of the shelf, and that is when you're ready to retire from real estate, you can exchange your properties into a fund, pay zero capital gains tax or depreciation recapture, and unlike a 1031 exchange, what you've done is you have totally exited the direct real estate business with a 721 exchange, and you still get financial upside with zero management duties. Retired. Finally, if you've ever wanted to tell me what you think about the GRE podcast, if this show has given you some fresh perspective or helped you become a better investor, the best way to support the show is to leave a quick rating or review. It helps more investors discover the show. Here's how to do it. Inside the Get Rich Education show page, on Apple Podcasts, scroll about halfway down to ratings and reviews, tap the purple stars to rate, and then tap the purple words, write a review. On Spotify, from the Get Rich Education podcast, tap the three dots near the top of the show page, tap Rate Podcast, and leave your star rating. That's all it takes. It's crazy that this show has almost 6 million total listener downloads, but yet across all platforms we have perhaps only 1,000 reviews, and that's probably because I rarely ask for them. I would greatly appreciate it. Until next week, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.